And right during the music, can we have the keyboard cat?
I can think of no other way to do this show.
If you guys ever watch Split Screen, one of the other shows here on Frontier Television on the Lone Star Network, they have some pretty funny stuff. They had an error-ridden show where they dubbed in some stuff later on. Richard produced it in the background and made it just a delight to watch. It was a lot of fun with Keyboard Cat.
Yeah, I can usually edit my way out of that one, but this one's all live, baby. So you get the raw, uncut version.
That's right. If you're here, you get what you get. So sucks to be you.
Are we starting this or not?
All right. Tell us what we're going to tell them.
We're going to tell you what we're going to tell you.
There you go.
Once again, you're at Dogleg Brewery in Fort Worth, Texas, and we actually have a pretty fun show for you tonight. We're going to be tasting some Ska Modus Operandi. That's the delightful can you see right in front of us here, a little green can. Got some IPA action going on. We've got some trivia, got some news, and we're going to be talking about some new segments for the show that we're really excited about. We hope,
new ideas.
Yeah, we hope you guys will be able to help us with that.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk about oxygen and why most brewers don't like it, but there's a couple out there that are actually into it.
Yeah.
So, Kyle, why don't you tell us about our beer tonight?
Modus Operandi. I mean, this is Ska Brewing, one of the few that cans. If you watched a few episodes back, you've got to watch Bono not remember some of the breweries or beers, actually, that can. But
I remembered Ska. It's one of the ones I got.
Yeah, you actually did, but you didn't remember any of their beers, did you?
True Blonde.
Oh, okay, so you got one. This beer, handcrafted Durango, it says there. This is an IPA. It's, from the last time I had it, I remember very much enjoying it. It's been quite a while. So
I've had nothing but love for this
Oh,
beer
man.
since my first try.
This
I mean,
is
you
wonderful.
you can smell the hops just like it's sitting there.
You open the can, and it just right in your face, hops.
Very impressively.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. There's floral notes there, but it's citrusy.
It's mostly citrus, but there is some floral. I mean, it just pops right out of the glass at you. It's a really neat smell.
Very tasty.
Yeah.
Heavy caramel.
Yeah, that's a lot more caramely than I was thinking it was going to be. That's
just
that's
a smooth
got a nice
bitterness.
balanced flavor. Yeah.
Smooth bitterness, man. That is a very tasty beer.
Wow.
And I love it when you have a nice half-inch head right there, just like you're supposed to have, and you taste and smell the hops as they're coming down. Because, I mean, that's what this beer is all about. It's an India Pale Ale. You're supposed to get hops, right? You're supposed to get that. So being able to taste it on the bubbles that's a good sign, man. That just makes for a good experience.
I think at some point in the future we are going to do a few episodes on different beer styles, and IPA is definitely one of the ones we're going to talk about. It's got a really neat history.
Oh, yeah.
But until then, we're going to talk about another beer style for our trivia.
Okay.
And that is Full Moon beer.
Full Moon
in
beer.
Switzerland, it's very common to brew a beer called Full Moon beer. They brew it, obviously, during the full moon.
Okay.
Why would they do that? What effect would that have? Like that's the trivia is what is the benefit to brewing
What is the benefit
during the full moon?
To brewing during a full moon? Wow, you lost me on this one. I don't know. I mean, I guess you would have to go back. Moons affect tides, right? So
it does. You're onto something. It has to do with gravitational pull.
So that if you've got a moon that's affecting the tides, and you're talking about gravitational pull, I'm going to go with Crozin buildup, and that maybe because of the way that's working, it holds down the Crozin from expanding too much and blowing out. It's a push, but
no. But let's give our audience members a chance to do some internet cheating, and they can look it up. And we can go on with the show.
On with the show.
So next, we've got some news. Kyle, you've got some news from the world of RAR Brewing.
Well, just talking about RAR.
A little bit from the Celtic. Why don't you tell us about that?
We just, we talked to a few people around the world of the RAR Brewery, and we subscribed to their emails, and they were talking just the other day. They're supposed to have opened up, get back ready for their tours, their roof's on, their facility's ready to go. All they're doing is waiting on an inspection or a couple of blessings from the city, and they'll be back in business. We're really looking forward to that, getting them back into their home world.
Everyone's really excited about this. The RAR Brewery here in Fort Worth, they're so good to home brewers. They really are. They really are, and I've never heard of a craft brewery that didn't actively give back to the world, just the profession in general,
Yep.
and the craft itself. But I guess maybe because RAR is the only one we have locally that it just seems like they go above and beyond. But I know they hold a real special place for the homebrewers here in the Fort Worth area. So we're really excited to have them back.
And when we were in South Carolina a while back, went up to where'd we go, babe? Not Columbia. What's the northeast city?
Charlestown.
Charleston. Thanks, babe.
No
so
problem.
we went to Charleston, South Carolina. Fantastic beer city. It's got quite a bit of history there. They've got a brewery downtown. They've got a great beer store, Charleston Beer Exchange. Mentioned it before. You can go online and actually order beers from them. But
Cool.
yeah, they were wonderful. Picked up about $250 worth of beer to bring back with me the last time I was there. They liked me. But anyway, we had a great experience there in that city, and was talking to the brewer at the local brew pub style establishment, and they were talking about how they have a monthly brew club, a home brew club that meets at their establishment, and they go upstairs and they're really friendly to them, and they allow them to try the beers that they have on tap and help figure out the problems that they've got as a brewery at the same time as helping the home brewers figure out their problems. So I mean, it really much is a camaraderie amongst home brewers and craft brewers.
And RAR is no different, and,
No
and
different.
things like that are the reason we're so excited to have them back. So moving on, the Celtic was this past weekend.
Celtic was this past weekend. The Celtic, final judging was done prior to this, but they had the announcements at the Scottish Festival. If you guys need that information or you weren't privy to it, we've got that. If you just email us at webcast@doglegbrewery.com or doglegbrewery@gmail.com or one of the million different emails that we have, check us out on Facebook. Let us know. We can post that information for you if you're interested in any particular style. Just let us know. We'll tell you how they did, which clubs won it, which individual brewers won it. Good competition again.
And before we go on to talk about some of our new segment ideas, I just want to bring up again, just because I'm so fascinated by this event, the event coming up here on June 12th. That is this Saturday.
Yep.
In Charlotte, North Carolina, and that is a Rhythm and Brews. I won't go through the whole thing, but it's going to be blues music, good music, local craft breweries there in the North Carolina area. So you're going to get good beer, good music, and it's for a good cause. It goes to help various causes that support Americans with disabilities. So if you're in the North Carolina area or you're going to be passing through for business or whatever, please check that out because that's going to be a really neat festival.
And those kind of deals are always wonderful.
They
Anytime you
really
have,
are.
Like a Great American Beer Festival. Haven't been. Heard great things about it. We're going this year.
Working. Oh, you actually are.
I'm definitely
working on
going. Definitely going this year. Question is, how do I get there? And
and how do you get home?
How do I get home? Exactly right. And, well, the biggest question being, how do I get all that beer that I'm going to buy?
Well, I'm driving, so if
Well, there you go.
I go, I'm driving. I'm taking the Element, so that thing can store some beer.
If there's one thing I know how to do, it's buy beer. So.
I'm Skippy. So y'all have been watching us for the last few months now, either regularly or on and off, and we've introduced some new segments. We've done away with some segments that weren't quite working, and we've got one that we're announcing coming up here in the next month to 2 months that we're really excited about.
Yeah.
And we are. I don't know, those of you who watched the St. Patrick's Day episode remember Jen the Beer Goddess. Those of you who hang out at the Flying Saucer know Jen the Beer Goddess, and she is going to be coming back on the show for a regular segment. We chatted with her about it this past weekend. She's going to be helping us. Kyle, let's set up this segment a little bit.
Well,
what made us think of this segment, rather, before we get to what it's about?
Well, the first thing that happened when we were both going to the Saucer was you experienced an interesting dynamic when you go to a beer facility like that, a place that serves beer, that allows you to talk to a waitress or a bartender or somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. And for the most part, everybody there knows a little something about beer, and to varying degrees. And one thing that we both found was that Jen is by far the best beer goddess that we have ever found at the Saucer. And
She's pretty much incredible.
yeah, and
really knows her stuff.
our palates were, we thought, sophisticated at the time when we came in, and little did we know. I mean, she taught us so much about beer, and the fact that we can just go up to her and say, hey, Jen, I've had this type of beer. I had this the other day, and I really liked it. What else would be along that lines? And without a doubt, right then, right there, she can reach into the cooler, pull out a beer, go over to the taps, find a beer, and give you something that will fit your palate, that you like, that was just like that beer. If it wasn't just that beer, she may have it.
And we continue this when we have friends in town. Even though we know a bit about beer, we have friends coming to town. Hey, I like Guinness and I like Murphy's, but I want to try something new. We immediately send them to Jen. Like I like the Ska Modus and I like the Dogfish Head 90. What do you think I should drink?
Yeah.
We send them to Jen because, we can make some suggestions, but she's going to throw something wild out there. And that is where this segment has come from. We're introducing a segment called Broadening Your Beer Horizons with Jen the Beer Goddess. And what this basically involves is members of the studio audience writing into Jen and saying, dear Jen, this is David in Jacksonville, Florida. I am a big fan of Bellhaven St. Andrews, and I also like the regular Bellhaven Scottish. Can you recommend a way for me to broaden my beer horizons? And we're going to go and we'll get her on the show. I mean, she can't be here live, unfortunately, because she works Monday nights.
Yeah.
But she is going to be here in digital shorts. And
so
you won't see our ugly mugs for a minute or two.
The whole premise of this is that it's going to be viewer-generated content. If we don't get enough examples and questions and reflections from you guys, if you don't send in, hey, I like this, I like this, I like this.
We'll just write her ourselves.
Yeah, well, we'll get her on one way or another, but the whole point of it is we want to help everybody out there and broaden their horizons. And we don't mind repeat customers. If somebody comes in and they say, I like this, and she recommends a beer and it's a great experience for them, wonderful, do it again. Now you like these 3 beers. There you go.
And that's one of the things that we were talking about during pre-show that makes this particular broadcast unique, is that we do encourage and we really want audience participation. I mean, we view this as a forum. That's what this is we get together with our friends on Monday nights and we talk about beer.
Yeah.
And we're not, and that this is part of it. We really want audience participation on this. So, do you have anything to add? I mean, I'm excited
just
about
a quick little anecdote. The other night we were out at Saucer on Friday night, and Jen was upstairs in the Half Acre, and we were drinking some beers, some great suggestions from her. And
Teddy
had a friend come in, a coworker actually, and she doesn't like beer. Self-proclaimed, I don't like beer. And Jen found things that she loved.
Yeah.
First visit, she came in this morning and said, man, I don't even like beer, but Jen gave me this, and they were great beers. And that's just a true thing. Every time we've ever taken somebody up there, we get the same response. It's wonderful when you have somebody like that to help lead you along the right path, because she won't let you try that beer you hate. She won't let you go the wrong way. So we may, on the other hand, be a little more sadistic, and you say, I wonder if they like bitter. Try this, and hand them a Modus Operandi.
Which actually blew up in our faces when my sister was in town, because I handed her a Ruination, and she fell in love with it.
Well, we've got different personalities. Yeah. We're going to test the limits of people. That's the way we serve people stuff. But whereas Jen knows how to actually subtly introduce them to new styles, and it's a tact we lack.
Yeah, and actually, Teddy just this past weekend went in, and Jen made a few good recommendations for her. So she's very good at what she does, and we'd like to have her helping you guys on a regular basis and helping us. So it's something that we're really encouraging you to write in on.
Well, that's that.
So
what do we got next?
Tonight we are talking about oxygen. And oxygen is good.
Not just for old people.
Not just for old people. Or fire. But oxygen in your beer. We have oxygen during brewing.
Yep.
We're going to talk about oxygen in the
second. We have no oxygen after boiling.
No oxygen after boiling. And we're going to talk about why that is important in your beer. And after your brew, oxygen will ruin your beer. It'll give it a stale flavor, sometimes a vegetal flavor, which, as we've mentioned in the past, will make your beer kind of taste like rotten tomatoes, maybe.
Usually more cardboard flavor.
Cardboardy?
Yeah, cardboard.
Staley?
Paper.
There you go.
It just tastes and smells stale. It's about the best way you can put it.
I don't know where I went off on, but anyway.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about two researchers that discovered why you want oxygen in your beer.
Not researchers found on www.bonoiswrong.com.
No, not the Bono's Wrong
not
researchers,
Dr.
but real live researchers at a university in Korea whose job is to study beer. And
terrible job.
Yeah, we should get them on for an interview. I bet nobody interviews those guys. They probably can't speak English.
Yeah, but they've got really good South Korean interpreters. So
that's true. So let's start with the boil. Let's take this chronologically. We have mashed our grains, and then we've extracted the sweet liquid, and then we've boiled. What happens during the boil, Kyle, to push off all the oxygen? Like, why are we oxygen free going in?
Well, basically the boiling process combines certain elements of the beer together and lets them evaporate out. Well, you look at anything, just like distilling water, that's how you boil it. You're getting rid of all of the complex oxygen ions through different evaporation techniques, and by the end of it, you're done. You got no oxygen left in that beer, and you started with a lot.
So,
but I mean, oxygen's what triggers all the processes of fermentation, be it bacterial or yeast infection, or I shouldn't say infection, bacterial infection or yeast domination. And that's how it goes.
And it also, I'm gonna have to cheat this here because the phrase sterols and unsaturated fatty acids just won't stick in my head for some reason.
Okay, well there you go. If you want to,
but essentially, yeast needs to produce these various nutrients that it uses to go on and reproduce and turn your wort into beer.
Right.
And oxygen gives it the ability to produce these nutrients.
Right.
So very important at the beginning of the beer. How we're going to get the oxygen into our wort. There's lots of different ways. When we pour our boiling, or I guess our chilled wort at this point, our chilled wort into the fermenter, we always run it through.
And that's a very important thing. We'll talk a little bit later about hot side aeration.
Yes, definitely. Very important thing. So when we're pouring our chilled wort into the fermenter, we're sending it through a screen. And that screen it's bubbling, it's introducing oxygen into the wort that way.
Right.
And in fact, let's back up now and talk about hot side aeration. I think this is kind of an important subject.
Hot side aeration. Now, there's people who go all the way back to the mash about whether you make the whole thing a volatile situation for what's leaving. Basically, oxygen in hot wort is bad, but oxygen in hot mash liquid, to me, I think the verdict's, I think it's pretty slim chance. People are talking about like whether they batch sparge and they splash their batch sparge too hard into the boil. Maybe you get a little bit of a taste difference, but I seriously doubt it. You're going to boil all that oxygen out anyway. Doesn't matter. So consider hot side aeration from the further side of it. So let's say you have some sort of a technique that moves the wort through the chiller. So you're moving it through a counterflow chiller, and it's kind of turbulent. You don't have a very good flow through, and so it's kind of cavitating inside the copper. And so you're going through there, and it's cooling. It only cools it to 95 because it's really hot in Texas, right?
Very hot.
Well, now you've got something that's been oxygenated at a higher temperature, about 95 degrees. If it's not below about 80, 85, then you could have some negative effects from that because it's now oxygenating in a temperature range where bacteria can get in there and change what's going on.
And bacteria, needless to say, is bad.
Yeah.
The enemy of good beer. And so...
The enemy of good beer, the friend of good cheese.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Fungus, I guess, with cheese, too.
The fungus among us. So... we looked at just splashing it around on its way into the fermenter.
Right.
A lot of people will, when you're making big beers, will actually run. They'll actually run pipe into the fermenting wort, and they'll pump oxygen through into the wort
Yeah,
itself.
a lot of craft breweries and a lot of home brewers even will have oxygen tanks around. I mean, Steve and Vicky, you guys can probably tell us about more of the numbers of people that do that. But I've heard quite a few stories about people who keep a tank of oxygen, just like we keep CO2 to keep our beers from having oxygen in them after the fact and for moving them through our beer lines. Well, they'll actually keep oxygen around in what's called a diffuser stone, and they'll take a diffuser stone through a hose, and they'll run that through, and it'll put oxygen in tiny, tiny, minuscule bubbles, which will be absorbed into the liquid much easier than large scale, basically large scale oxygen bubbles, which is another way. Another way to oxygenate your beer.
Another way to oxygenate your beer. Now, there is an unproven so far technique that doesn't require oxygen but produces a lot of the same effects, and that is a lot of brewers have been experimenting with adding olive oil to their beer rather than oxygen. And the reason for this is, remember we were talking about earlier, and this is why I wanted to get this particular technical piece in. We were talking earlier about unsaturated fatty acids and how your yeast needs those unsaturated fatty acids to do its thing. So adding olive oil gives it those unsaturated fatty acids without the requirement of oxygen.
And just so you know, Steve and Vicky just mentioned that they use oxygen when they're doing their beers in a diffuser stone, quote unquote, when they remember it. So I mean that's it. It's not necessary, but some people find it helpful, and
some people swear by it.
And the toughest thing in all beer making is repeatability. And so if you're using an oxygen source in a diffuser stone, you're getting the same amount of oxygen in there every time. So you're going to get very similar attenuation rates, very similar yeast activity. Whereas if you're just shaking the crap out of a carboy, you may get great oxygen content one time and no oxygen content the next, and your attenuation rates can vary big time.
So after the initial fermentation,
okay,
you've gone through the initial fermentation.
Oxygen was good.
Oxygen was good. Now oxygen is bad.
You got a beer.
You've got beer. You don't have wort anymore.
Right.
You have beer, and so this actually plays into some of the problems that our emailer last week had with his beer tasting stale.
Right.
And that was because he had racked to a secondary and left too much room there in the secondary fermenter.
Too much headspace.
4
gallons in a 6.5 gallon carboy.
Yeah, and so what was ending up was he was getting oxygenated beer. And that's something, that's where you run into problems. And that's why when you're bottling, you always, if you're bottling off a keg, you always want to give it a shake to make sure that you bubble up and kick all any remaining oxygen out of that bottle.
Or you use some sort of a dual gauge CO2 source where you're actually pumping in the liquid at the same time that you're pumping in CO2 and counter pressure filling your beer bottle. So I mean, there's lots of different ways to do that, but the idea is once your beer is a beer, you don't want oxygen to touch it in the slightest. And if it does touch it in the slightest, say you're racking from a secondary into a keg, putting into a keg, well, first thing you do, what most people will recommend, is you fill that keg up with CO2. Then you open it so there's CO2 vapor in there, and then you fill it up with liquid, so it's pushing out the oxygen. The CO2 vapor is still staying in there a little bit. Then you close it back up, and then you put more CO2, bleed it, more CO2, bleed it, get it ready to go. Then you've got no oxygen. And trust me, that's probably the biggest thing you can do.
Absolutely.
Worry about oxygen. Doing it beforehand, that's one thing, but doing it after you've got a beer, that is the most important time for oxygenation.
So we talked earlier about a pair of researchers in Korea who discovered oxygen being good for you in your beer. And this is something that we thought was kind of interesting. We'd neither of us, had you ever heard of it? I'd never heard of this.
I don't even know what you're talking about. So
until we were doing really show research, I'd never heard of this. In Korea, it's become popular to, rather than carbonate your beer, to oxygenate your beer. So when you drink a carbonated
Wow.
beer, it has CO2 actually trained into the beer. In Korea, they're using the same concept, but with O2. And what they claim is, I'm going to read this directly off a website that's advertising one of these beers. It helps clarify your brain, energizes your body cells, and maintains healthy and resilient skin.
After all, they are scientists.
They are scientists. And what's going on here?
From the scientists that brought you global warming.
Yes, here it is. Never question science. And what's going on here is that these guys, they lined up a whole bunch of people and had them drink oxygenated beer and carbonated beer of similar strength and at a similar pace. And what they found is that not only did the people drinking oxygenated beer sober up quicker, they could drink and drink and drink and drink all night without getting ridiculously hammered, but they ended up having either little or no. And supposedly it doesn't drastically affect the flavor of the beer, though I don't know how it couldn't.
I mean, yeah, if you drink it today.
Yeah, and so this is something that if you're going to be traveling in Korea.
Yeah, I wouldn't try to ship this over to the States and drink it because by then it's probably awful. But
yeah, we would have to invite Matt in to describe its flavor.
We would definitely have to have an awful bucket.
Yeah,
which I don't know if you watched last week, Steve and Vicky, but we had our first we had our first awful bucket experience with a tasting. It wasn't our first homebrew tasting, but we tasted one that had a gusher. So the gushing liquid ended up in the awful bucket. The beer itself was not bad.
The beer was not bad at all.
Yeah,
it was definitely not awful. And so if I don't know anybody that's going to Korea anytime soon. Teddy
I know somebody who's going to Korea.
Teddy does have a cousin.
But close enough.
Yeah,
right?
Teddy has a cousin that lives over there. I might see if he can bring some with him the next time he comes home. That would be kind of neat.
Yeah, I'll talk to Jesse Browdy. See if he can.
Yeah, there we go. I want to try this oxygenated beer. I really do.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, nothing better than beer soaked through cardboard to get me going through my day.
Overly enjoyed seeing Mike's beer gush last week.
Yeah.
It was funny.
It was a gusher.
It was definitely a gusher.
It was a mountain full. It basically looked like the old science experiment when you drop vinegar and baking soda together and make a volcano.
Yeah.
It was like that.
Definitely.
But it was Mr. Beer is one of his first beers. It was his first beer, wasn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah.
As far as first timers go, he did pretty well.
There was no problems with the beer. He didn't have any.
It wasn't infected.
No.
He
no infection.
There wasn't any flavor from not rinsing the sanitizing agents. I mean, it was a little extracty, but you're supposed to get that flavor when you're making extract brew. So
exactly, when you're making,
because it's an extract brew,
heavy extract like that. Yeah, it was beer.
So anyway,
I want to hear about this trivia.
I was just gonna say full moon beer. According to researchers in Switzerland, I'm all about researchers tonight for some reason. When you brew during the full moon, it induces a shorter lag time in the yeast, and lag time is one of the 4 or 5 life cycles of yeast in beer. The beginning is lag time, and it shortens the lag time, induces a quicker fermentation, and a more thorough attenuation, which results in drier, smoother tasting beers. And
so kind of like the opposite, which I was thinking the only thing I could think of was the effect of the liquid and everything like that. Well, full moon being the biggest pool, I was kind of going, oh man, well, I'm probably not right with this Krasen holding down. Sounds like quite the opposite. That Krasen probably bubbles to high hell.
Yeah.
Because I bet you're talking about quick hitting and quick attenuating. I wonder if that has anything to do with random fermentations. I know, Steve, do you know the lunar cycle of when you made this recent big beer that you made? Does the lunar cycle maybe play into
we might, right there? We might have to start checking the lunar calendar.
Troubleshooting is one of the things we talked about last week.
That's right, troubleshooting, and now, in addition to sanitation, fermentation, we need to check the lunar calendar.
Lunar calendar.
Very important in fermenting your beer. So, do we have plans for next week yet, or are we going to talk about those during post-show?
We'll talk about next week's during post-show. Do you have any ideas for beers? I mean, maybe we can come up with something right now. Let everybody put out a beer that you want us to taste next week right away, the first good beer we see up there, or good idea for a beer, that's our next shot. And by the way, Tim out there, yes, you checked the beer, and it works great. We did that. We actually checked boxes back from Belgium when we went, and fantastic results. We lost one bottle, and if you would have seen the way we packed them and the way everything was, you'd be amazed that that's all we lost. So, way to go. American did a good job handling that luggage, getting it back from Belgium for us.
They did an absolutely wonderful job. So we're going to look into those beer recommendations during post-show, I think.
Okay.
And that's going to leave us until next week when we see you again. And until then, just always remember that we are not professionals.
So please, try this at home. Come on, now let the music do the music. He'll be there. So, when is... I'm going to read that. No, I'm not. People found out the ads are not actually the same for every person.
Oh, God, that is awful.